A wounded German shepherd climbed into the back of a black pickup, not begging for help, only trying to survive. The man who found her was Owen Calder, a retired Navy SEAL who had learned to fix engines better than broken hearts. He thought he was only saving one old dog from the snow, but Sable had carried a forgotten name, an old duty, and a kind of loyalty the town had stopped believing in together. They would find the doors no one knocked on. The people left cold, and the courage to stand up when kindness was being redirected toward the lights. This is a story about rescue, but not just from a storm. And if it touches your heart, tell us where you're watching from. Leave your thoughts below, and please like and subscribe to help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers, so we can keep creating stories of loyalty and hope. Snow fell over Heartfall Ridge, with the quiet confidence of something older than the town itself. It softened the pitched roofs of cedar cabins, gathered along the antlers of the brass elk sign above the tavern door, and silvered the pine trees that stood along the ridge like solemn old guardians. By late afternoon, the whole valley had taken on that pale winter glow that made even rusted mailboxes and cracked sidewalks look briefly forgiven. Owen Calder did not believe much in forgiveness. He believed in working engines, tightened bolts, good tires, full fuel tanks, and keeping a shovel in the truck bed from November to April. He believed in showing up when a road disappeared under snow and somebody's car slid sideways into a ditch. He believed in black coffee, short answers, and leaving before gratitude had time to become conversation. At 51, Owen still carried the build of a man who had once been asked to carry too much, and had not yet figured out how to set it down. He stood a little over 6 feet, broad in the shoulders, solid through the chest, with a face weathered by mountain wind and old sleeplessness. His dark hair, threaded with silver, was flattened beneath a black knit cap. A short beard shadowed his jaw, gray showing most at the chin. Under his winter coat, he wore the same olive-drab combat shirt he often wore beneath work layers. The torso fit close, the camouflage sleeves faded from years of use, the bands around the upper arms worn pale in places. It was not a costume. It was not nostalgia. It was simply one of the few things he owned that had survived weather, grease, and memory. Without asking questions, his black pickup rolled to a stop in front of the Brass Elk, a tavern old enough to creak in the wind and proud enough to pretend it did not. Warm light spilled from its windows onto the snow. Inside, someone laughed too loudly. Somewhere in the kitchen, grease hissed. The Brass Elk over the door wore a cap of snow on its metal antlers, looking less majestic than mildly offended. Owen cut the engine and sat for a moment. On the passenger seat lay a folded list from Nora Whitcomb, commander of the volunteer rescue team. Sandbags delivered to the low road. Generator checked at the E-station. Food pickup from Odette. Fuel cans tomorrow if the storm track worsened. He rubbed a thumb over the small brass gear on his key ring. It clicked softly against the truck key. 5 minutes, he muttered. 5 minutes was what he promised himself whenever he entered the Brass Elk. 5 minutes to pick up whatever Odette Vaughn had packed for the rescue team. 5 minutes to avoid being pulled into a story, a complaint, or one of Odette's attempts to feed him like he was a stray cat with truck keys. He reached for the door handle. Then something thumped behind him. Owen froze, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a dull, uneven sound from the pickup bed, followed by a scrape against metal. His first thought was the sandbag stack had shifted. The tailgate was half-lowered from the last delivery because one of the hinges liked to stick in cold weather, and Owen had meant to fix it before the month ended. Meant to, like most things that waited politely until they became trouble. Another sound came, a breath. Thin, fast, broken at the edges. Owen turned his head slowly toward the rear window. Snow gathered on the glass in soft flecks. The truck bed looked empty from that angle. Only the dark line of the lowered tailgate and the lump of shoveled snow near the back tire showed through. He opened the driver's door and stepped out. Cold took hold of him at once. It slid beneath his collar, bit the skin above his beard, and filled his lungs with clean iron. Owen closed the door quietly. He did not know why he moved quietly. He only knew that the sound he had heard did not belong to a loose tool. The snowbank beside the rear tire had been disturbed, not by boots, by paws. Claw marks cut through the crust, desperate and uneven, leading up the slanted pile of plowed snow toward the open tailgate. Owen's hand tightened on the side of the truck. "Well," he said under his breath, "that's new." He stepped around to the back. In the far corner of the pickup bed, pressed against the wheel well, lay a German shepherd. For a second, Owen only looked. The dog was thin enough that the shape of its ribs showed beneath damp yellow, and black fur snow clung to its back and shoulders. One ear stood upright, the other tipped slightly where the edge had been torn long ago. Its muzzle was dark, silvering around the lips. One front paw was tucked close, red staining the fur near the toes. But it was the eyes that held him. Amber clear. Frightened, yes, but not wild. The dog did not bark. It did not whine. It did not crawl toward him or bare its teeth. It pressed itself deeper into the corner. Body low, head lifted just enough to watch him. The posture struck Owen in a place he did not appreciate, not surrender position. An exhausted creature holding the last piece of ground it had left. Owen felt something old shift behind his ribs. He lifted both hands, palms open. "Easy," he said. The dog's eyes moved to his hands, then back to his face. Its breathing came in shallow bursts. It trembled, though Owen could not tell if it was from fear, cold, pain, or all three marching together. Behind him the tavern door swung open. Warm noise spilled out, followed by Odette Vaughn's voice. "Owen Calder, if you're standing out there pretending you don't smell pot roast, I'm calling that a medical condition." Owen did not look away from the dog. Odette. The tone was enough. The tavern noise dimmed behind him. Boots crunched on the porch. Odette came down the 2 steps, wiping her hands on a towel thrown over one shoulder. She was 62, round-faced, sharp-eyed, and built with the kind of sturdy warmth that made strangers confess things over coffee. A brass elk pin shone on her flannel shirt, catching the tavern light. Then she saw the dog. Her expression changed quickly, not into softness, but into anger trying to behave itself. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. The shepherd flinched at her voice, but did not move before Owen could answer. Another sound rose from the alley beside the tavern, a man's voice slurred and ugly. "There, I told you, you mangy devil," Lyle Brannock staggered out from between the buildings. One gloved hand gripping a length of rope, the other braced against the wall until he remembered to look less drunk. He was in his late 40s, though bad liquor and worse choices had dragged him toward 60 in the face. His coat hung open. His beard was crusted with snow, and his eyes shone with the wet anger of a man who had already lost an argument with himself. "That dog's mine," Lyle snapped. "Get it out of your truck." Owen stepped back from the tailgate and placed himself between Lyle and the pickup bed. "No." Lyle blinked, as if the word had taken a moment to find him through the whiskey. "No, you don't even know what that thing is. I know it climbed into my truck to get away from you." Odette came to stand beside the rear fender, towel still in hand. "I saw you chase her down the alley, Lyle." "Stay out of it, Odette." "I own the building you just used as a witness stand, so I'll stand where I like." A couple of men had appeared in the tavern doorway now, drawn by the ancient music of trouble. Hartfall Ridge was polite in public and shamelessly curious near windows. Lyle pointed the rope at the dog. "She came off the old Rusk place. I've been clearing that land for the new buyers. She's been tearing through trash, sleeping in the shed, making a mess of everything. I was told to deal with it." The word deal landed wrong. The shepherd shifted in the truck bed. Not much. OT much. Only a tightening through the shoulders. The injured paw drawing closer. The amber eyes fixing on the rope. Owen saw it. He also saw the bruise. Like shadows beneath the dog's fur, the way it made itself smaller without ever looking weak. There were kinds of fear that scattered a body, made it frantic and loud. This was not that. This was fear disciplined into stillness. Owen had known men like that. He had been one, on days he did not name. Lyle took a step forward. Move. Owen did not. Snow whispered between them. The tavern light touched the side of Owen's face and left the other half in blue shadow. Go home, you always this noble with things that bite? Owen's mouth tightened. Only on Thursdays. From the porch, one of the men gave a nervous snort. Odette shot him a look sharp enough to sober Soup. Lyle's face reddened. That animal is a liability. If it bites someone, that's on the property owner. Then you should have called animal control. I was going to. With a rope? Lyle looked at the rope as if surprised to find it in his hand. For one bare second, the anger slipped, and something else showed beneath it. Fear, not of the dog, of being seen. Owen understood that too. Guilt often wore anger because anger had better posture. The shepherd made a sound then, not a growl, not a bark, a small, rough breath, almost swallowed before it became anything. Owen turned slightly. The dog was looking not at Lyle now, but at the brass gear hanging from Owen's key ring. It swung from his hand, catching the tavern light in tiny flashes. The shepherd's eyes followed it once, twice, as if the small movement gave it something steady in a world full of hands that reached too fast. Owen closed his fingers around the key ring. The dog looked up at him. Something passed between them too quickly to be named. Not trust. Trust was too large a word for a bleeding animal in a stranger's truck. But recognition may be the first faint thread of it. Owen heard himself speak, before he had fully decided. She's hurt. I'm taking her to Tessa. Lyle barked a laugh. You don't get to decide that. I just did. You going to pay for it? Owen's eyes moved to him calmly. Lyle took half a step back without meaning to. Odette folded her arms. I'll call Tessa and tell her Owen's coming. You all lost your minds, Lyle spat. That dog's nothing but trouble. Owen reached into the truck bed, slowly, and pulled an old wool work blanket from beneath the tool chest. The shepherd stiffened when he moved, but he did not reach for her head. He did not touch her yet. He only laid the blanket down within reach, letting the edge fall near her paws. She can be trouble somewhere warm, he said. Odette's mouth twitched despite herself. Lyle looked from Owen to the onlookers to the dog. The little crowd had grown just large enough to make cruelty inconvenient. That was the thing about towns. They could ignore suffering for a long time, but only if it stayed out of the light. Lyle cursed under his breath, threw the rope into the snow, and backed away toward the alley. This isn't over. Owen watched him go. Most things aren't. The alley swallowed Lyle in blue shadow and falling snow. For a moment no one spoke. Then Odette moved first. She stepped close, but not too close, peering into the truck bed with her towel clutched in both hands. Poor girl, she murmured. The shepherd's eyes flicked toward her. Don't fuss, Owen said. I am a tavern owner. Owen fussing is half my business model. Do it quietly. Odette nodded once, all humor leaving her face. Tessa's clinic is still open. I'll call. Owen removed his coat. The cold struck through his combat shirt at once, but he barely noticed. He folded the coat in his hands, then paused. The dog watched every movement. He lowered the coat slowly into the truck bed, not over her head, not trapping her, just placing it beside the blanket so she could choose the warmth without feeling captured. The shepherd hesitated. Then, inch by inch, she shifted her body toward the coat. Her injured paw dragged slightly, and a shudder passed through her frame. Owen's jaw tightened. When the coat touched her side, she did not pull away. That felt like more permission than he deserved. All right, he said softly. We'll do this the hard way then. He closed the tailgate carefully, leaving it secured but not slammed. Odette returned from the tavern door. Tessa says bring her in through the side entrance. Less noise, she's getting a room ready. Owen nodded. Odette held out a paper bag. Food for the rescue team. He looked at it, then at the dog, then back at the bag. Odette sighed and tucked it onto the passenger seat herself. Men give them a crisis, and they forget pot roast. Owen almost smiled, almost. He climbed into the truck and started the engine. Heat coughed weakly from the vents. In the rearview mirror, through the small back window, he could see the shepherd curled beneath his coat, amber eyes still open, still watching, always watching. As Owen pulled away from the Brass Elk, the tavern lights blurred behind curtains of falling snow. Hearthfall Ridge stretched ahead, quiet and white, its streets glowing under the last blue of evening. Somewhere beyond town, the old Rusk land sat under its own silence. Somewhere behind him, Lyle Brannock was nursing his anger. But inside the truck, there was only the rumble of the engine, the soft rattle of the brass gear against Owen's keys, and the fragile sound of an injured dog breathing through the cold. Owen told himself this was simple. A wounded animal. A warm clinic. One decent decision on a winter evening. Nothing more. But some fates did not arrive with trumpets or lightning. Some did not break down the door or call your name across a battlefield. Some climbed into the back of a black pickup using a dirty snowbank and the last of their strength. Some lay trembling under your old coat, and some looked at you as if they had been waiting, not for rescue exactly, but for the first person who would not hand them back to the dark. Dr. Tessa Hargrove's clinic sat behind the old bakery, tucked between a narrow alley and a row of snow, bent lilac bushes that would not bloom again until May. At night, with the bakery dark and the town pressed quiet under falling snow, the clinic looked almost too small for serious pain. Its windows glowed pale yellow. A horseshoe wind chime hung beside the side entrance, knocking softly in the wind with a sound like tired bells. Owen parked near the back door where Odette had told him to go. For a moment, he stayed behind the wheel. The engine ticked as it cooled. Snow gathered along the hood. In the rearview mirror, he could see the German shepherd curled in the pickup bed beneath his coat, her eyes still open, catching faint light from the clinic door. She had not slept. Neither had he. Not really, though the drive from the Brass Elk had taken only 7 minutes. Owen stepped out and shut the door with care. He walked to the back of the truck, opened the tailgate, and paused before reaching in. The dog watched him. Clinic, he said, as if that explained anything. Her torn left ear twitched. Owen took that as the only vote he was going to get. He slid one arm under her chest, and the other behind her hips, slow enough that she could object. Her body went rigid. Every muscle in her seemed to become wire, but she did not bite. She did not even growl. She only stared past his shoulder into the dark alley, as if pain was a private matter, and being carried was an insult she would remember. "You and me both," Owen muttered. She was lighter than she should have been. That fact struck him harder than the blood on her paw. A German shepherd ought to have weight. Muscle resistance. This one felt like a proud structure after a long fire, still standing, but with too much air where strength should have been. The side door opened before he reached it. Tessa Hargrove stood in the doorway wearing blue-gray scrubs under a thick field jacket, her brown hair shoved back in a hurried knot. She was 46, sharp-eyed and practical, with the tired steadiness of someone who had seen animals arrive in every condition humans could excuse. A stethoscope hung around her neck, its tubing wrapped in a strip of faded blue cloth. She looked at Owen first, then at the dog. Whatever joke she had prepared died before it got out. "Exam room 2, she said, "no lobby." Owen carried the shepherd inside. The clinic smelled of disinfectant, wet fur, old wood, and lavender trying bravely to lie about the other 3. The hallway lights were dim, but exam room 2 was bright, white, and waiting. Tessa had already placed a rubber mat over the steel table and spread towels beneath it. "Set her down gently," she said. "I was planning to throw her like firewood." "Good your sense of humor survived the parking lot." "Barely." He set the dog on the mat. Her nails pressed into the rubber. Her head lowered. Her eyes moved from Tessa to the door, from the door to the window, from the window back to Owen. Tessa noticed every glance. "Female," she said, not asking. "Seems so. No collar. Nothing I saw. Name?" Owen looked at the dog. The dog looked at the door. "No." Tessa washed her hands. "Then for tonight she's ma'am." Owen huffed once, almost a laugh, then caught himself. Tessa began without ceremony. She did not coo. She did not crowd. She offered the back of her hand, waited, then moved with the careful efficiency of someone who respected fear enough not to flatter it. The shepherd flinched at the first touch but held still. Under the lights, the damage became clearer. She was underweight, not at death's edge, but close enough that her body had begun making hard bargains. Her gums were pale. Her pads were cracked. The front paw had a cut between the toes, ugly but cleanable. There were bruises along one hip, a raw scrape near the shoulder, and old scars under the thick fur. Some were smooth and long-healed. Some had healed badly. Tessa parted the fur near the right shoulder and went still. Owen saw the scar then, a long pale line beneath the dark coat, half hidden like a river under ice. "Old," Tessa said. "How old? Hard to say. Months, years, not from tonight." The dog turned her head slightly, watching Tessa's fingers. Owen felt an unpleasant pressure in his chest. He had seen scars become maps. Most people pretended not to read them, but the body kept its own records, whether anyone filed paperwork or not. Tessa cleaned the paw. The dog trembled once, hard. Owen placed 2 fingers lightly on the edge of the exam table, not touching her, just near enough to be seen. Her eyes shifted to his hand. The trembling eased. Tessa glanced at him, quick and quiet, but said nothing. That was one thing Owen liked immediately. She knew when silence was medicine. After the paw was wrapped, and the worst bruising checked, Tessa took a scanner from the counter. "Let's see if someone is missing her." Owen watched the device pass over the dog's neck, shoulders, ribs. No beep. Tessa tried again. Slower, still nothing. "No chip?" Owen asked. "I didn't say that." Tessa frowned, moving the scanner along the shoulder blades. Sometimes they migrate. Sometimes scar tissue or swelling makes it tricky. Sometimes equipment enjoys humiliating me at 9 o'clock at night. The scanner gave a weak chirp, then went quiet. Tessa's eyebrows drew together. "There," she murmured. "Maybe, not enough to pull a number." Owen did not like the disappointment he felt. No chip meant no one to call. A weak signal meant somewhere. Perhaps there had once been a name. Tessa set the scanner down. "I'll try again once she's hydrated and less inflamed. Tonight she needs fluids, food in careful amounts, antibiotics for that paw, and rest." At the word rest, the shepherd turned her eyes toward the door again. Tessa saw it. "I have a quiet kennel in back." The moment the metal latch clicked open down the hall, the dog changed. It was subtle enough that a careless person might have missed it. She did not snap or bark. She did not throw herself off the table. Instead, everything in her locked. Her head lowered. Her breathing stopped for half a second. Her eyes fixed on the open exam room door, calculating distance. Owen felt the room tighten around them. Tessa stopped moving. "Well," she said softly. "That answers one question." "What question?" "Whether she's just scared." The shepherd stood frozen on the mat, injured paw tucked, body gathered as though every muscle had been given an order. Tessa closed the kennel latch down the hall. Only then did the dog breathe again. Owen looked at her. "What was that?" Tessa leaned against the counter, arms folded. Not simple fear. Not a stray panicking because something is new. That was memory. Owen said nothing. Tessa's eyes moved to him. "You've seen that before?" He did not answer fast enough. She accepted that as an answer. The clinic heater hummed. Snow brushed the window. Somewhere in another room, a sedated cat snored with surprising authority. Tessa picked up a small packet of medication and began writing instructions. "She can't stay here tonight." Owen looked at her. "You just said she needs medical care?" "She does. And this is a clinic." "Very observant. Tessa, she'll tear herself apart in a kennel before morning. Maybe not physically, maybe just inside. Either way, I'm not doing that to her unless I have no choice." Owen stared at the shepherd. The dog stared at the door. "No," he said. Tessa did not look up from writing. "I haven't asked anything yet." "You're about to." "I was about to say you should take her home for a few days." "No. See? Now I asked. I fix engines. Wonderful engines are also easier when they stop leaking." "I don't know dogs. You knew enough not to reach over her head. You knew enough to carry her slowly. You knew enough to stand between her and Lyle Brannock without turning the parking lot into a rodeo. That doesn't make me qualified." "No," Tessa said, tearing off the instruction sheet. "It makes you less dangerous than most qualified people." Owen's jaw worked. The shepherd shifted her weight. Her wrapped paw touched the mat, then lifted again. Tessa softened, but only by a degree. "Listen to me. She needs a warm, quiet space. No crowds, no kennel, no one grabbing small meals, warm water. Antibiotics twice daily. I'll come by tomorrow morning." I didn't volunteer. Neither did she. That landed harder than Owen wanted. He looked away first. Tessa placed the medication on the counter between them. "This dog doesn't need someone to fix her. She needs someone to stop making things worse." Owen let out a breath through his nose. "You practice that line?" "Only on stubborn men with rescue complexes." "I don't have a rescue complex?" "You came in holding a bleeding German shepherd under your coat." "My coat was already dirty." Tragic. For the first time that night, Owen's mouth almost gave in to a real smile. Almost, the shepherd's head turned toward him, as if she had heard that almost smile in the air. Owen saw it and hated how much it mattered. He signed the clinic form. Tessa packed the antibiotics, soft food, gauze, saline, and a folded towel into a brown paper bag. "Lift her the same way," she said. "Slow. Let her see your hands. Don't put your face near hers. Don't take it personally if she ignores every comfortable place you offer." "I ignore comfortable places too." I had a feeling. Owen carried the dog back to the truck, this time placing her in the passenger footwell instead of the open bed. Tessa helped lay towels down, then stepped back. The shepherd did not relax, but she did not fight. That was enough for the night. The drive to Shaw's Auto and Towing took them along the south edge of town, past dark storefronts and snow, covered benches, past the little church with its crooked steeple, past houses where yellow light glowed behind curtains. Owen kept one hand on the wheel and the other near the gearshift. The dog sat low in the footwell, wrapped in his coat, head just high enough to see him. Her eyes did not leave his face. "You can stop doing that," Owen said. She did not. "Suit yourself." The garage waited at the edge of town where the plowed road bent toward the highway. The sign above the bay doors read Shaw's Auto and Towing in black letters faded by weather. Owen pulled inside, closed the door behind them, and turned on the overhead lights. The place smelled of motor oil, iron rubber, old coffee, and wood smoke from the little stove in the back room. A practical smell. An honest smell. Owen liked machines because they complained in ways that made sense. A loose belt squealed, a cracked hose leaked, a dead battery stayed dead. There was mercy in that kind of clarity. People were harder. Wounded animals, apparently, were worse. He laid an old wool blanket near the stove, filled a bowl with warm water, and set a small portion of soft food beside it. Then he lifted the shepherd from the truck and set her down on the concrete floor. She stood unsteadily, taking inventory. Bay doors, office back hall, side entrance, window. Owen watched the path of her eyes. Of course, he murmured. She did not go to the blanket. She limped to the narrow space beside the hallway, lowered herself with effort, and settled where she could see every entrance at once. Owen looked at the warm blanket by the stove, then at the dog. Perfect. Guest of honor chooses the draft. She rested her head on her paws. Her eyes stayed open. Owen sat on an overturned milk crate a few yards away and opened the paper bag of medicine. Tessa's handwriting was neat enough to be threatening. Small meals, warm water, no sudden movements. Do not crowd her. Call if swelling increases. Call if she refuses water. Call if she collapses. Owen read the list twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on the workbench beside his keys. The brass gear on the key ring caught the light. The shepherd's eyes followed it again. Owen noticed. He picked up the keys and let the gear rest in his palm. This, her ears shifted. It's from an old transmission, he said. First truck I fixed after I came home. The dog blinked. Owen frowned at himself. Right, you don't care. But he did not put the keys away. For the next several days, the garage changed in ways so small Owen would have denied them if accused. A second bowl appeared near the sink. A folded towel stayed by the stove. The office chair was moved 3 feet so he could see the hallway without standing. He started warming water before coffee. That last one disturbed him most. Tessa came by each morning, usually with snow in her hair, and some dry comment ready before breakfast. She checked the paw, listened to the dog's heart, examined the bruises, and tried the scanner twice more. The signal remained weak and useless. She has a history, Tessa said on the 4th day. Most things do. This one has paperwork somewhere. Paperwork didn't keep her warm. No, but someday it may tell us who failed to. Owen did not answer. By the end of the first week, the shepherd accepted food without waiting for Owen to leave the room. By the second, she slept for stretches long enough that her breathing deepened and her paws twitched. By the third, she walked the length of the garage twice a day under Tessa's strict orders, her injured paw healing, her ribs still too visible but less sharp beneath the fur. Owen did not name her. Not at first. Names were hooks. Names made things stay. But the dog needed something better than ma'am, and Tessa refused to keep calling her the patient like a retired librarian with tax problems. The name came on a gray morning when Owen found her sitting by the open bay door, watching snow fall across the yard. Not trying to leave, just watching. A dark shape against winter. Not black, not shadow, Sable. He said it once without meaning to. Sable. Her right ear lifted. Owen went still. The dog did not come to him. She did not wag. She did not perform a miracle for the sake of his lonely heart. She simply looked over her shoulder. That was all. It was enough to make so he used it again. By the 4th week, Tessa allowed Sable to ride in the cab on short, calm trips when the weather was clear. Therapeutic exposure, she called it. Car rides, Owen said. Therapeutic exposure sounds like I went to school. Sable sat in the passenger footwell the first time, rigid but not panicked. Owen drove slowly through town, past the Brass Elk, past the bakery, past the small fire hall where the rescue team's tracked vehicle sat under a tarp. The radio on Owen's dash crackled. Nora to Shaw. You around? Sable lifted her head. Owen noticed the change before he reached for the handset. Her body did not tense with fear. It sharpened with attention, he answered. I'm around. Generator check at the East Station before tonight. Fuel lines acting up again. I'll handle it. Bring gloves. Real ones. Not those sad leather things you pretend are gloves. Owen glanced at Sable. Every owns a critic. Nora laughed once over the radio and signed off. Sable was still staring at the speaker. She did not understand the words. Owen knew that, but she understood urgency, the tone, the pattern. The invisible bell that rang in certain voices when help was needed. Owen set the handset down slowly. No, he told her. Sable looked at him. You're not working. She blinked once. You're recovering. Her gaze did not move. Owen sighed and started the truck toward the garage. Outside, Hearthfall Ridge shone under a clean fall of snow, bright enough to make the whole town look kinder than it was. Inside the cab, an old dog with a new name listened to the quiet radio as if somewhere beneath the static, the world was calling her back. And Owen, who had spent years trying to be useful without being known, felt the first uneasy suspicion that Sable did not only want to survive, she wanted to matter. He knew enough about that hunger to be afraid of it. Hearthfall Ridge looked honest after a snowfall, which was to say it lied beautifully. The center of town glittered beneath fresh white powder, all warm windows and tidy wreaths, pine garlands wrapped around lampposts, tourists laughing outside the rental shop in bright jackets that had never known grease, smoke, or worry. The ski resort above the North Ridge had strung lights along its lodge roof, and from a distance the place looked like a crown set on the mountain's brow. Owen Calder drove through it without slowing. Sable sat in the passenger footwell, wrapped in the dark thermal blanket Tessa had insisted on. Her head lifted just enough to see over the edge of the seat. 4 weeks of food, medicine, warmth, and stubborn patience had put some weight back on her frame. Her ribs no longer looked like fingers pressing from beneath her coat. Her wounded paw had healed enough for short walks. The scar under her shoulder remained hidden, unless the fur parted the wrong way. She still did not waste energy on charm. When a tourist in a red parka waved at Owen's truck, Sable simply watched him with the grave suspicion of a retired judge. "Don't worry," Owen said. "He waves at everybody. It's a condition." Sable blinked once. The radio clipped beneath the dash crackled. "Nora to all East Route volunteers. Weather update just came in. First real push hits before dark. Frostline deliveries move up 2 hours. Repeat? 2 hours." Owen lifted the handset. "Shaw copies." Nora Whitcomb's voice came back quick and dry. "You have Sable with you?" Owen glanced down. Sable had already turned her head toward the radio. "She's in the truck." Truck only. No heroics, no improvising, no letting her convince you she's in charge. Owen looked at the German shepherd. "She's not that convincing." Sable rested her chin on the edge of the seat and stared at him. Nora said, "I heard that silence. That was a lie." The line clicked off. Owen muttered something about organized women and their supernatural ability to ruin peace from miles away. Then he turned off Main Street and headed east. The town changed gradually, as if embarrassment preferred not to be noticed. First the sidewalks became narrower. Then the wreaths vanished from the doors. The houses leaned farther apart. Old wooden structures patched with tarps, sheet metal, and whatever hope looked like when purchased second-hand. Smoke rose from crooked chimneys. Trucks sat under snow with cracked windshields and good tires because people in Frostline Row could postpone many things, but not tires. The road dropped into a shallow bend where wind gathered loose snow and flung it across the blacktop. Beyond that bend stood Frostline Row, a strip of homes and small workshops pressed between the frozen creek and the east tree line. It was not ugly. That was what outsiders got wrong. Poverty did not erase beauty. It only made beauty work harder. There were blue curtains in one window, a row of red mittens drying over a porch rail, a carved wooden fox nailed above a doorway, and a battered mailbox painted with stars by someone whose hands had shaken, but whose patience had not. Owen slowed near the first house on Nora's list. "Simple," he told Sable. "We drop supplies. We check generators, we leave." Sable looked out through the windshield. Owen frowned. That was not a debate. The first delivery went according to plan. He carried 2 grocery boxes and a 5-gallon water jug to the porch of Mrs. Donnelly's house, knocked once, waited until the porch light flickered, and stepped back before the door fully opened. He heard a voice call thanks through the crack, but he was already turning away. That was how Owen liked gratitude, brief, muffled, and behind a door. At the second house, Sable shifted. Not dramatically. She did not bark or claw at the door. She lifted her head and stared toward the side of the house where no path had been shoveled through the new snow. Owen had already placed the supplies on the porch. "Leave it," he said. Sable kept staring. He followed her gaze. The front walkway had boot prints from the day before, half softened by snowfall, but no fresh tracks led to or from the door. The porch light was off, though smoke came from the chimney in thin, uneven puffs. Owen stood still. It was the kind of detail he might have ignored a month ago. A porch light off. No new tracks. A house staying quiet. People valued privacy out here, and Owen valued theirs because it let him keep his own. Sable made a low sound in her throat. Not a whine, not a command. A question. Owen sighed. "You are making my life more social." He went back to the porch and knocked harder. No answer. He waited. Then knocked again. "Mr. Dean?" The name on Nora's route sheet read Russell Dean, retired truck driver. "Lives alone. Fuel checked last week. Food delivery every Wednesday." From inside came a muffled thump. Owen set the box down and moved to the side window. "Mr. Dean?" Another sound, weak, somewhere toward the back. Owen tried the door. Locked. Of course. He looked back at the truck. Sable had risen carefully in the footwell. Front paws braced, ears forward. "No," he told her through the windshield. "You stay." Her expression suggested she had filed his opinion under weather conditions, noted irrelevant. Owen retrieved a pry bar from the truck and went around to the back, where a narrow porch sagged under snow. The back door was half blocked by a shovel that had fallen across it. Inside, Russell Dean lay on the kitchen floor, one leg twisted under him, a broken mug near his hand. He was a large man in his early 70s with a gray beard, a red thermal shirt, and the offended look of someone caught losing an argument with gravity. "Owen," Russell rasped. "Morning. Door's locked, I noticed. Did you break it?" "Not badly." Russell stared at him. "That means yes." "It means your door was already old." Owen helped him sit up slowly, checked for obvious injury, then radioed Nora for a medical assist. Russell had slipped while carrying wood in from the back porch. Nothing seemed broken, but his pride had suffered extensive damage. As Owen wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, Russell squinted toward the window. "That your dog?" No, Sable was visible through the truck windshield, watching with amber intensity. Russell raised one eyebrow. "That dog know she ain't yours?" Owen did not answer. Russell gave a dry chuckle that turned into a cough. "Truckers know. You can own a rig, but once it saves you in bad weather, you start asking permission." By the time a volunteer arrived to sit with Russell, the wind had sharpened. Owen returned to the truck and opened the driver's door. Sable settled back down, not smugly, because dogs had more dignity than men, but close enough. "Don't start," he said. She placed her chin on her paws. They continued down Frostline Row after Russell's house. The deliveries slowed. Not because the snow got worse, though it did. Not because the route grew harder, though it did that too. They slowed because Sable kept noticing things that were inconveniently human. At one cabin, she turned her head toward a generator shed, where the engine coughed in a bad rhythm. Owen checked and found the fuel line icing over 10 more minutes, and the machine would have died, taking the heat with it. At another, she stared at a porch where 3 bags of supplies from the previous week still sat untouched beneath a tarp. Owen knocked, waited, and discovered the owner had gone to stay with a neighbor after her pipes froze. The supplies were moved 2 houses down where they were needed more. Each small discovery cost Owen time. Each saved someone trouble. That irritated him more than failure would have. Near the end of the row stood Larkin Laundry, though the painted sign over the door had lost enough letters to read Larkin Laund if snow covered the wrong places. Warm steam fogged the front windows. A string of mismatched socks hung above the radiator, inside like flags of surrender. Owen parked by the curb. Maeve Larkin opened the door before he could knock. She was small, 63, with short silver curls and a purple scarf wrapped twice around her neck. Her hands were reddened from soap and winter, strong in the knuckles. She looked at Owen, then at the truck, then at Sable. "So that's her," Maeve said. Owen reached for the grocery box. News travels. In Frostline, news limps, freezes, complains about its knees, then arrives anyway. He carried the box inside. The laundry smelled of soap, damp wool, hot metal, and coffee that had been reheated too many times to have legal standing. 2 washing machines churned in the corner. On a folding table, Maeve had arranged small jars of pills, heating, oil slips, and handwritten notes beside a stack of clean blankets. Owen looked at the table. Maeve saw him looking. "Don't make that face." "What face?" "The one men make when they realize women have been running civilization with notebooks and old cookie tins." He looked away. She handed him a mug of coffee. "I'm not staying. You're holding it." He was. Somehow through the window, Sable watched the laundry with quiet attention. Maeve moved to the glass and lifted one hand. Sable did not wag, but her torn ear shifted. Maeve smiled faintly. "Smart girl. Doesn't hand out trust like Halloween candy." Owen took one sip of the coffee and regretted several life choices. Maeve nodded toward the table. "Donnelly needs lamp oil. Russell will pretend he doesn't need someone checking on him tonight. Halverson's roof is sagging again. The 2 men in Unit 6 have been splitting one space heater. That on Nora's list?" "No, that's on mine." Owen picked up one of the handwritten pages. Names, addresses, needs, notes about who had pride, who had no family nearby, who would refuse help unless it was called a delivery error. This was not charity, it was intelligence. Better than most reports he had read in uniform. Why doesn't Nora have this? She has enough fires. Maeve took the page, and people are more honest with laundry than with officials. Owen looked out the window at Sable. The dog's gaze moved from Maeve's table to Owen's face, as if she had watched him discover a map he should have asked for years ago. For a moment, the noise of the washing machines faded beneath the wind outside. Owen had spent years believing usefulness was enough. Arrive, repair, deliver. Leave, no questions that might become promises. No cups of coffee. No names held too carefully. But here was Maeve's table, full of names. Here was Sable, looking through the glass as if a closed door was not the end of responsibility. Owen set the mug down. "Make me a copy." Maeve's eyes narrowed. "Of the list?" "No, of your pie recipe," she snorted. "You don't deserve pie." "Then the list?" Her expression changed, softened almost invisibly. "I'll write clean. Don't pretty it up." "I never pretty up the truth. Waste of ribbon." The bell over the door jingled before Owen could answer. A man entered backward, dragging a bent snow shovel and half a pine branch. He wore a patched canvas coat, a knit cap with a hole near the crown, and the cheerful, wind-burned expression of someone who considered bad weather a personal invitation. "Maeve," he announced, "good news. Your gutter is no longer full of ice." Maeve folded her arms. "Clay Booker." "If the bad news is that my gutter is now on the ground, only emotionally." Clay turned, noticed Owen, and grinned. He was around 50, lean as a ladder, with a face made of angles and mischief. "Shaw, I saw your truck, thought the snow had finally developed taste. It hasn't." Clay looked out the window. "That the famous dog? She's not famous. In this town, surviving 1 week with you makes her a legend." Owen took the supply list from Maeve and tucked it into his coat before anyone could see him care. Clay tapped the bent shovel against his boot. "I'm heading to Halverson's roof next, unless Nora has you saving the Eastern Kingdom first. Halverson's on Maeve's list." "Maeve's list outranks the Constitution." Maeve pointed at him. "Only during storms." The 3 of them stood there in the laundry. Steam rising, snow tapping the window, the world outside beginning to blur white around the edges. It should have felt crowded. Owen usually disliked crowded. Instead, it felt inconveniently alive. He left before the feeling got comfortable. The afternoon darkened early. By the time Owen reached the last stretch of Frostline Row, the wind had begun pushing snow sideways across the road. Sable remained alert, but tired. Tessa's rules echoed in Owen's head with the annoying clarity of truth. No pushing her, no using her, no letting purpose outrun healing. So when Sable lifted her head toward one final house, Owen almost ignored it. The house belonged to no one on the urgent list. A narrow place with pale blue shutters and a porch sagging on one side. No footprints marked the walk. A wind chime knocked weakly under the eaves. Owen's hand hovered near the gearshift. "We're done," he said. Sable looked at the house. He closed his eyes briefly. "You're not even trying to be subtle." She gave no answer. Owen parked. This time, he did not leave supplies and run. He carried a box to the porch, knocked, waited, and knocked again. A woman's voice answered from inside, thin but steady, telling him to come in if he was not selling religion or cable. He found Mrs. Halverson sitting in her kitchen under 2 blankets, the stove off, a half-empty mug of cold tea beside her. The roof had leaked into the back room, and she had been too embarrassed to call. The generator still worked, but the vent pipe had iced over. Dangerous if ignored. Owen fixed it in 20 minutes. Clay arrived halfway through, announced that the roof was still attached by stubbornness and old sins, and climbed up to clear the weight from the worst corner. Maeve called through on Owen's radio to confirm someone would bring lamp oil before dark. By the time Owen returned to the truck, his gloves were wet, his shoulders ached, and Sable had lowered herself in the footwell with the careful dignity of an elderly queen pretending she had not needed a nap. "You did nothing," he told her. Her eyes opened, and somehow caused all of this. Her tail moved once beneath the blanket, only once. It was not much. It was enough. Owen drove back toward the garage as evening settled over Frostline Row. Behind him, porch lights glowed one by one through falling snow. Not all of them. Some still stayed dark, but more than before. He passed Maeve's laundry, where steam clouded the windows. Clay's crooked truck sat by Halverson's house. Russell Dean's porch light burned yellow, and a volunteer sedan was parked outside. The row did not look rescued. It looked noticed. That was different. At the edge of town, the resort lights shimmered on the mountain, like a separate constellation. Beautiful. Distant, unworried. Owen glanced down at Sable. She had finally closed her eyes. For once, she was not watching the doors, the windows, the road, the world. She was sleeping while he drove, trusting the motion of the truck and the man at the wheel. Owen felt something in his chest loosen and ache at the same time. He had spent years delivering help without entering anyone's story. It had seemed safer that way, cleaner, like leaving a box on a porch. But Sable had made him knock, and once a man started knocking, he had to hear what answered. The resort lights burned brighter than the houses in Frostline Row. From the east road, they looked almost unreal, strung along the mountain lodge in golden lines, shimmering through snowfall like some cheerful kingdom that had never heard of frozen pipes or rationed lamp oil. The tourists called it beautiful. They stood on heated decks with paper cups of cider, taking photographs of winter as if winter were a costume the town wore for them. Owen Calder knew better. Winter was not a costume. Winter was a judge. It asked who had wood stacked before the first storm, who had medicine delivered before the roads closed, who had neighbors with keys, who had money for propane, who had a roof that could carry the weight of a sky that would not stop falling. And lately, winter had been asking questions Hartfall Ridge did not seem eager to answer. At 7 that morning, Nora Whitcomb called an emergency route review in the volunteer rescue room behind the fire hall. The room smelled of coffee, wet wool, marker ink, and old maps. Snowmelt pooled beneath boots. A weather radio muttered from a shelf like a nervous priest. Nora stood over the folding table with her yellow grease pencil in hand, marking roads in sharp strokes. Her red rescue jacket was unzipped, gray hair tucked under a wool cap, eyes tired but clear. "We're missing inventory," she said. No one joked. That was how Owen knew it was bad. Deputy Calvin Reese stood near the wall with his waterproof notebook open. He was neat even in a storm, uniform jacket zipped, radio clipped perfectly at his shoulder, black hair damp with melting snow. Calvin was the kind of man who lined up pens by size, and probably apologized to traffic cones after moving them. "Missing how?" Owen asked. Nora pointed to the paper sheets spread across the table. "Approved list says Frostline Row was supposed to receive 20 emergency blankets, 12 oil vouchers, 6 medication transport packs, and 10 food crates yesterday." Owen looked at the list. They didn't. "No," Nora said. "They received 9 blankets, 4 vouchers, 2 medication packs, and 6 food crates." Calvin cleared his throat. "The transfer logs show the rest were rerouted." "To where?" Calvin hesitated. Nora answered for him. "North Ridge Resort." The room went quiet except for the radio hiss. Sable lay beside Owen's boot on the warmest patch of floor near the heater vent. Tessa's rules still stood firm. No long walks, no heavy work, no being treated like equipment. Sable had come only because Owen had been on delivery duty afterward, and because leaving her at the garage had resulted in 1 overturned water bowl, 2 offended looks, and a level of silence that felt legally actionable. At the word resort, Sable lifted her head. Owen noticed, so did Nora. "Before anyone starts growling," Calvin said, glancing briefly at Sable, and then realizing the unfortunate phrasing. "The paperwork has signatures? The reroute was authorized under emergency tourism protection?" Owen stared at him. "Emergency? What?" Calvin looked uncomfortable. "It's a municipal clause. If weather traps visitors in high-occupancy lodging, supplies can be temporarily redirected to stabilize the economic center." "Economic center," Owen repeated. Nora's pencil tapped once on the table. "People in Frostline Row are heating soup over camping stoves." Calvin's mouth tightened. "I'm not defending it. I'm saying the forms exist." "That's the trouble with forms," Owen said. "They don't shiver." No one replied. Outside, the wind pressed snow against the fire hall windows in pale streaks. Owen looked at the numbers again. Not enough blankets, not enough fuel, not enough medicine, not enough of anything, unless a person lived uphill where the windows were large, and the lobby had a stone fireplace tall enough for a family to stand inside. Nora folded Maeve Larkin's handwritten list and slid it across the table to Owen. "Maeve says 3 homes are sharing 1 oil tank. Russell Dean needs a follow-up. Halverson's roof is patched, not fixed. Unit 6 still has 1 heater." "Maeve know about the reroute?" "She knows enough to be furious. That's her resting state." Nora did not smile. Odette called too. "2 drivers at the Brass Elk saw resort trucks loading pallets behind Town Hall last night." Calvin looked up quickly. "Odette told you that?" "She told everyone who bought coffee." "That tracks," Owen said. Nora leaned both hands on the table. "I need eyes on the community warehouse before the next distribution goes out." Quietly. No accusations, no speeches, just eyes. Owen already disliked where this was going. "I'm not your politician." "No," Nora said. "You're worse, you're useful." Calvin closed his notebook. "I'll go. It's a law enforcement matter if the logs don't match." "And I'll drive," Owen said before he could stop himself. Nora's gaze moved from Owen to Sable. "Dog stays in the truck." Owen looked down. Sable's amber eyes were open now, calm and severe. "She heard you." "I was talking to you." "Everyone is lately." The community warehouse sat behind Town Hall, a low gray building with a loading dock, 2 roll-up doors, and a roofline buried under snow. In summer, it stored folding chairs, sandbags, traffic cones, and festival signs. In winter, it became the town's throat, the narrow place through which mercy had to pass before it reached anyone hungry. Owen parked beside a county salt truck. Sable remained in the passenger footwell, wrapped in her blanket, watching through the windshield. The heater ran low. Her ears tracked every sound, the scrape of boots, the beep of a reversing truck, the hollow clatter of a loading door rising. "Stay," Owen said. She looked at him. "I mean it." She blinked slowly, which Owen chose to interpret as obedience and not contempt. Calvin met him at the dock with his notebook already open. "We ask for current distribution logs, verify the outbound pallets, compare against Nora's route sheet. You say that like people enjoy giving you things? I have a badge. I have met people with badges who couldn't get ketchup from a diner." Calvin gave him a look. "Are you always like this?" "No, sometimes I'm asleep." Before they reached the door, a white box truck backed into the loading bay. Its side bore the discreet blue and silver logo of North Ridge Resort. A man in a fleece vest jumped from the cab, signed a clipboard held by a warehouse clerk, and pointed toward 3 shrink-wrapped pallets stacked near the far wall. Owen stopped. Calvin stopped beside him. The pallets were labeled "Winter Together," "Relief Drive," "Blankets," "Shelf," "Stable Food," "Medical Transport Packs," fuel vouchers sealed in plastic envelopes. Calvin's face changed by 1 degree. Not shock. Not yet. Something worse for a careful man. Arithmetic. The clerk saw them and stiffened. "Deputy," Calvin stepped forward. "Morning, Allen. We need to review outgoing distribution." Allen was a thin man with a nervous beard and a beanie pulled too low. His eyes went from Calvin to Owen, then through the open bay toward Sable's dark shape in the truck. "Everything's signed." "I didn't ask if it was signed," Allen swallowed. The resort driver loaded the first pallet with a forklift. Owen watched blankets meant for cold houses rise into the air and drift toward a truck that would climb the mountain toward chandeliers, fireplaces, and rooms with extra pillows. It was not theft in the old dramatic sense. No one had broken a lock. No one wore a mask. The pallet moved under fluorescent lights, guided by forms, initials, and polite efficiency. That made it feel worse. Calvin opened his notebook. "Who authorized this transfer?" Allen pointed to a clipboard. "Council Office Emergency Protection Order?" "Signed by," Allen hesitated. Owen did not need him to say it. The door from the office hallway opened, and Grady Cole walked in as though summoned by the discomfort of honest people. He wore a camel wool coat over a navy sweater, a silver snowflake pin shining on his lapel. His hair was perfectly combed, his smile warm in the way hotel lobbies were warm, controlled, expensive, and not meant for sleeping. "Deputy Reese," Grady said. "Owen, I wasn't aware this was an inspection." Calvin straightened. "It's a verification, of course. Verification is the backbone of public trust." Owen looked at the pallet now halfway inside the resort truck. "That what we're calling it?" Grady turned to him with practiced patience. "We are calling it emergency allocation. North Ridge currently houses 112 guests, 34 staff, and several stranded motorists. If the resort loses heat or food service, the county faces a larger crisis. Frostline Row already has one, and we are addressing it. With what's left," the forklift beeped as it backed away. Sable's head lifted in the truck. Through the windshield, Owen saw her eyes fix on the moving pallet. Grady followed his glance. "I see your dog is recovering." Owen's jaw tightened. Calvin spoke before he could. "Councilman, the approved route sheet allocates these pallets east." The route sheet was drafted before the storm adjusted. Was Nora notified? Grady's smile thinned. "Nora is excellent in the field. Allocation policy sits with the council." There it was. Not cruelty. Not exactly. A door closing quietly. Calvin looked down at the forms Allen handed him. Every line was signed. Every box checked. Grady's name appeared where authority required it. Another signature sat beneath it from the tourism board, emergency liaison. The papers were clean, too clean. Owen thought of Maeve's laundry table, crowded with names written in practical ink. He thought of Russell on the kitchen floor, embarrassed and cold. He thought of Mrs. Halverson, under 2 blankets, apologizing for needing help, clean paper, dirty weather. Calvin's pen hovered over his notebook. For the first time since Owen had known him, Deputy Reese did not seem to know where to put a fact. Grady stepped closer, lowering his voice. No one is being abandoned, but leadership means prioritizing. If the resort collapses during peak season, jobs vanish. Tax revenue vanishes, then Frostline suffers more. I know that sounds harsh, but grown towns require grown decisions. Owen studied him. The worst part was that Grady believed himself. A simple villain would have been easier. A man stealing blankets to sell them would have given Owen a place to put his anger. But Grady had built himself a cathedral out of practical language, and somewhere inside it, people without lobby fireplaces were freezing politely. Calvin closed the folder. I'm making copies of these logs. Grady's eyes cooled. That seems unnecessary. For verification, a long pause. Then Grady smiled again. Of course. Owen turned away before his temper found a more expensive outlet. As he walked back to the truck, the resort vehicle pulled out, snow clinging to its tires. Sable watched it go. She did not bark. She did not lunge. She simply tracked the truck until it disappeared uphill toward the lights. Owen opened the driver's door. You see it too, huh? Sable looked at him. He climbed in and shut the door. For a while he did not start the engine. The warehouse bay remained open behind them. Men moved boxes. Clipboards changed hands. The world continued pretending that a signature could keep someone warm. Calvin came to the passenger side window and tapped once. Owen lowered it. The deputy's face had lost some of its tidy certainty. I'll back up the logs, Calvin said. Radio times too. Truck departures, route changes. That allowed? No. Owen raised an eyebrow. Calvin slipped his notebook into his jacket. Not prohibited either. Owen almost smiled. Careful, deputy. That's how civilization starts. Calvin looked toward the hill road where the resort truck had gone. I kept thinking if the paper was right, the action was right. And now? Now I think paper is just where people hide decisions after making them. He walked away before Owen could answer. That evening, the town meeting filled the old municipal hall beyond its usual capacity. Storm warnings had a way of making people want to stand under fluorescent lights and argue about things they should have fixed in autumn. Folding chairs scraped, coats steamed. Someone had brought cookies, because even civic tension in Vermont apparently required baked goods. Sable stood beside Owen near the back wall, close enough that her shoulder brushed his leg. Tessa had allowed the meeting only because the hall was warm and Sable would not be walking much. Owen suspected Tessa had also wanted him supervised. Nora stood near the front with Maeve beside her. Odette occupied the aisle like a queen defending a bridge, brass elk pin gleaming on her apron. Calvin sat at the side table, notebook open, expression grim. Grady took the podium. He spoke well. Owen had to give him that. Smooth without rushing, concerned without sounding guilty. He spoke of difficult choices, economic stability, protecting visitors, preserving jobs, and avoiding panic. He praised the volunteers. He praised the resilience of Frostline Row in a way that made Owen's hands curl. People nodded. Not all. Enough then Maeve stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The room somehow made space for her quiet. Resilience, she said, is what people call you when they do not plan to help soon. The hall went still. Grady's smile held, but it had to work harder. Maeve opened her purple notebook and began reading names. Not accusations. Names, needs, dates. Who had not received lamp oil, who had borrowed medicine, who had split canned soup across 3 households, who had declined help because they thought someone else needed it more. Each name changed the room. Numbers could be debated. Names had chairs at the diner. Names had laundry. Names had trucks, porches, bad knees, cracked chimneys, stubborn pride. Grady waited until she finished, then nodded solemnly. Mrs. Larkin, your devotion to your neighbors honors this town, but unofficial lists can stir unnecessary fear. when people don't understand the full scale of Owen saw the pallets. Odette cut in. A murmur ran through the room. Grady turned toward Owen. There it was, the place Owen had hoped not to stand. He felt every eye find him. Old instinct told him to step back into the wall, to become useful furniture, present but unnamed. Sable leaned lightly against his leg, not dramatically. Just weight. Warm, living weight. Owen looked down. Her amber eyes were not on Grady, they were on him, as if the room, with all its words and polished excuses, had narrowed to a single question. "Will you leave this one too?" Owen exhaled. "I saw the pallets," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. Grady's expression remained pleasant. "Owen, I respect your service and your volunteer work. But we all know you prefer action to administration. These issues can look simple from outside the decision-making process." Owen felt the old door inside him begin to close. That familiar retreat. The cold comfort of silence. Let the talkers talk. Let officials file their clean papers. Let him go back to roads, engines, storms. Machines did not imply he was unstable in public. Grady's tone softened further, which somehow made it sharper. "And given recent events, perhaps your concern for that injured dog has made this feel more personal than procedural." The room shifted. Not much. A week ago, he might have said something short and useless. Tonight, he looked at Grady and did neither. "You're right," Owen said. That surprised the room. Grady blinked. Owen continued, "It is personal. Russell Dean on his kitchen floor is personal. Maeve dividing oil vouchers is personal. Mrs. Halverson apologizing because her vent pipe iced over is personal. Frostline Row isn't a line item. It's people." No one spoke. Owen looked toward Calvin. "Deputy has logs." Calvin hesitated only a second, then stood. "I have copies of the transfer orders, departure times, and radio notes from the last 2 distributions. They show approved east, route supplies redirected to North Ridge Resort without field notification." Grady's face did not crack. It became very still. Nora stepped forward. "No one here is saying visitors don't matter. We're saying the people without fireplaces matter too." Odette lifted one hand. "And before anyone asks, yes, I have coffee ready for a long meeting." That broke a small nervous laugh from the back row. It did not erase the tension. It made it breathable. Grady placed both hands on the podium. "This is not the forum for emotional escalation." Maeve closed her notebook. "No, it is the forum for blankets." The room changed after that. Not into unity. Real towns rarely turn like weather vanes in one gust. Some people argued, some defended the resort, some worried about jobs, some spoke of fairness as if it were an expensive luxury. But others began standing. A mechanic, a waitress, 2 retired ski patrol members, a resort housekeeper still in uniform. One by one, the issue stopped being policy and became weather. Who would be warm tonight? Who would not? Owen did not speak again. He did not need to. By the time the meeting adjourned, nothing had been solved. Not officially. But Nora had secured a temporary hold on the next resort reroute. Calvin had agreed to submit the copied logs to the county emergency office. Maeve had 3 new volunteers for Frostline checks. Odette had somehow fed half the room cookies and threatened the other half with decaf. Outside, snow fell harder. Owen stepped onto the municipal hall steps with Sable beside him. Across town, the resort light still glowed on the mountain. Beautiful, distant, unashamed. Owen looked down at Sable. She was tired, leaning a little more weight on her good side, but her eyes remained clear. "You know," he said quietly, "I liked this town better when I didn't know so much about it." Sable sneezed into the snow. Owen nodded. Fair point. Behind them, the hall doors opened. and people spilled out into the winter night, still arguing, still thinking, still carrying pieces of the truth they had not brought in with them. The storm had not stopped, but for the first time, neither had the questions. The scanner beeped on a Tuesday morning, just as Owen Calder had begun believing it never would. It was not a dramatic sound, not loud enough for revelation, not soft enough for mercy. Just a small electronic chirp in Dr. Tessa Hargrove's exam room, thin and stubborn. Like a bird tapping at a frozen window, Sable stood on the rubber mat with the patience of someone tolerating insult for a higher purpose. Her injured paw had healed cleanly. Her coat had thickened with food and warmth. The ribs that had once shown beneath her yellow and black fur were still there, of course, as all ribs were, but they no longer looked like a warning. Tessa moved the scanner slowly along Sable's right shoulder. The machine chirped again. Owen, leaning against the counter with his arms folded, straightened. Tessa did not smile. That was how Owen knew she had found something important. "Well," she said. "Well, what?" "Well, either my scanner has developed a sense of humor, or your dog has a microchip lodged under scar tissue near the shoulder instead of where polite chips are supposed to live." Sable turned her head toward Owen, amber eyes calm but suspicious. "She's not my dog," Owen said automatically. Tessa looked at him over the scanner. The silence grew teeth. Owen sighed. "Fine, continue." The third scan pulled a partial number, not enough to open a clean file, but enough to suggest that somewhere, in some system older than the clinic software and more complicated than any living creature deserved, Sable had once been recorded. Tessa typed the code into her computer. The screen took its time. Owen hated old computers almost as much as old wounds. Both made a man wait while pretending something useful was happening. A record appeared, then failed to load. Tessa tried again. A few lines surfaced broken by missing fields and outdated links. Canine Transitional Care. Retired Working Dog. Search and Rescue Support. Private Rehabilitation Contractor. Then a name. Rusk Canine Recovery, New Hampshire. Owen read it once. Tessa read it twice. Sable did not care about screens. She cared about the door, the window, the space beneath Owen's hand where his brass gear keychain rested against his palm. "That mean anything to you?" Tessa asked. "No? Good. I was hoping one of us could be ignorant with confidence." Owen glanced at her. "You're enjoying this." "I enjoy records less when they look like someone dragged them behind a snowplow." She copied the number onto a yellow sticky note, then reached for the phone. "What now?" "Now," Tessa said, "I bother a man who used to know where lost working dogs went when everyone else stopped knowing." The man's name was Martin Kells. He did not answer the first call, or the second. On the third, the line clicked, and a dry voice said, "If this is about a Labradoodle with a county license from 2018, I retired specifically to escape that dog." Tessa closed her eyes. "Good morning to you too, Martin." Owen heard a chair creak on the other end. "Tessa Hargrove, either something is complicated, or you need a favor big enough to embarrass both of us." "Both. Wonderful. I'll put coffee on." Tessa gave him the chip fragment, the partial record, and the name Rusk. Martin went quiet for longer than Owen liked. "Send me the scan," he said finally, "and photographs of the dog, full body, face, shoulders, any old scars." Tessa looked at Owen. Owen looked at Sable. Sable looked offended. "Photographs," Owen repeated. "She'll survive being admired," Tessa said. Sable endured the pictures with the air of a queen being forced to renew a driver's license. Martin promised nothing. That Owen respected. People who promised too quickly usually had not yet met the truth. The next 3 days passed under a bruised gray sky. Hearthfall Ridge kept moving through its own troubles. Calvin Reese filed copies of the warehouse logs with the county emergency office. Nora fought to keep the next supply run aimed east. Grady Cole gave a radio interview in which he used the words measured response, economic stability, and misunderstanding so often that Odette threatened to throw a spoon at the receiver. But beneath all that, another current moved. Tessa called twice with nothing. Then once with almost nothing. Then, on Friday afternoon, she told Owen to come to the clinic. He arrived with Sable in the passenger footwell and a bad feeling under his ribs. Tessa had printed a stack of papers. Some were clean, some were faded copies of copies. A black and white photograph lay on top. In the photo, Sable was younger. Not a puppy. Never that. But younger, fuller through the chest, coat glossy, ears sharp, eyes bright with purpose. She stood beside a man in a canvas field jacket who knelt with one hand resting lightly near her shoulder. He had a broad, tired face, a trimmed beard, and a smile. So gentle it felt almost out of place in an official file. Tessa tapped the page. "Dane Rusk," she said. "Ran Rusk Canine Recovery in northern New Hampshire. Specialized in retired working dogs. Search and rescue. Military. Law enforcement. Disaster dog. The ones too old, too injured, or too complicated for easy adoption." Owen looked at the photograph. Sable had risen beside him. Her eyes fixed on the paper, Tessa noticed but did not move it closer. Martin found enough to confirm she was transferred there after retirement. Not full military records. Civilian transition record. Her listed name was Sable. Owen felt the name settled differently this time. Not a thing he had given her. A thing he had returned by accident. He swallowed. She had the name already? Yes. The room grew quiet around that small fact. Owen had named her in the garage because she had looked like a dark shape against snow. He had thought the name belonged to that morning. To him, to the strange beginning of trust between them. But she had carried it long before he knew her. A name was not ownership. Sometimes it was a door someone else had built, and you were only lucky enough to find the key in the snow. Tessa continued gently. Dane died 18 months ago, heart failure. The recovery center closed. Some dogs transferred properly. Some records were incomplete. Sable was sent to a temporary farm placement near here. The old Rusk place, Owen said. Not Rusk's place, different property, but close enough for local confusion. The farm changed hands. A private buyer came in. Animals moved. Paperwork lost. Martin found notes about a contracted caretaker, but nothing clean after that. Lyle, possibly. His name appears on a labor invoice tied to that property. Not as an owner. Just hired help. Owen's hands curled once. Sable looked away from the photograph and pressed her shoulder lightly against his leg. Not asking him to rage, asking him to remain. Tessa slid another sheet across the counter. There's a living emergency contact, Dane's sister, Naomi Rusk. Owen's first response was not relief. It was fear, sharp and shameful. Emergency contact meant claim. Claim meant someone might come. Someone might take Sable from the garage, from the blanket near the stove, from the passenger footwell where she had begun to sleep during short drives. Someone might say thank you, Owen, and remove the one living creature that had taught him to knock on doors. He hated himself for thinking it. Tessa saw enough of his face to understand. She may have been looking for her, Tessa said. Owen looked at Sable. Sable looked at the old photograph. She should know, he said, though it cost him. Tessa's expression softened in that narrow way of hers. Yes, she should. Naomi Rusk arrived 2 mornings later in a small blue Subaru crusted with road salt. The snow that day was bright, the kind that fell in slow shining pieces, more blessing than threat. Owen had cleared the yard twice before she came, though he told himself it was for the clinic van, the rescue truck, anyone. Not for a woman driving from New Hampshire with a dead man's memories in her passenger seat. She stepped out of the Subaru slowly. Naomi was 49, slender under a navy winter coat, with shoulder-length brown, blonde hair threaded with silver and pulled into a loose tie at her neck. Her face was long, tired from the road, and kind in a way that did not demand kindness back. She carried a canvas bag against her chest, like it held something breakable. Owen stood by the open bay door of Shaw's Auto and Towing. Sable stood beside him. Not behind him, not in front. Beside. Naomi stopped when she saw her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Naomi brought one gloved hand to her mouth. "Oh," she whispered. Sable's ears shifted. Owen looked down, watching carefully. No forced reunion, no calling, no rushing, no human need thrown onto an animal that had already carried too much. Naomi seemed to understand. She crouched slowly in the snow several feet away and set the canvas bag down. "Hi, Sable," she said. The name came out different in her voice. Older, not better, not worse, just older. Sable took one step forward, then stopped. Naomi opened the bag with hands that trembled, despite her efforts. She pulled out a folded piece of navy cloth, worn soft at the edges. Owen did not know what it was at first. A scarf, maybe. A bandana. Something that had once been used enough to lose its shape. Naomi laid it across her palms. "This was Dane's," she said. "He used to keep it in his coat pocket when he worked with the dogs. He said some of them trusted smell before they trusted people." Sable walked toward her. Slowly, no music, no miracle, no great dramatic leap across the snow. Just an old German shepherd crossing a garage yard. One careful step at a time. She lowered her head to the cloth, sniffed once. Then again, her body became very still. Owen felt the world hold its breath. Naomi's eyes filled, but she did not reach for Sable. Good, Owen thought. Good. Sable pressed her nose deeper into the cloth. A sound left her then, so small, it might have been pain or memory or both. Her tail did not wag. She did not collapse into joy. Instead, she stepped forward and rested her head against Naomi's knee. Naomi bent over her without grabbing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, girl." Owen looked away, not because the scene was too sentimental, because it was not sentimental at all. It was worse. It was true. Here was proof that before the alley, before Lyle, before the truck bed and the coat and the garage, Sable had belonged to a gentler chapter. Someone had known how she liked to be approached. Someone had carried a cloth that smelled like safety. Someone had said her name enough times for it to survive hunger, snow, and bad hands. Owen had not saved a stray from becoming nothing. He had found someone who had been something all along. That distinction hurt in places he had not planned to use that morning. Inside the garage, Naomi spread a few photographs on Owen's workbench. Dane with 3 old dogs sleeping around his chair. Dane brushing Sable's coat in a patch of autumn sunlight. Sable standing beside a training cone, dignified and annoyed. Sable with a gray muzzle already beginning, leaning against Dane's leg. "He used to say she was too serious for her own good," Naomi said. Owen glanced at Sable, who had taken the navy cloth to her blanket and was lying with one paw across it. "That tracks." Naomi smiled through the ache. Dane called her his winter compass. She could find a person in bad weather better than most people could find their own kitchen. Tessa, who had joined them quietly near the office door, shot Owen a look. Owen ignored it. Naomi ran a thumb along the edge of one photograph. When Dane died, everything became paperwork. Lawyers, transfers, bills, property, dogs, donors. I thought she had gone to a good temporary placement. Then the placement stopped answering. The farm sold, I called, I emailed. Everyone told me records were being updated. Her voice thinned, but did not break. And then there was nothing. Owen leaned against the workbench. "That wasn't your fault." Naomi looked at him. "Maybe not, but fault and grief are old friends. They visit together whether invited or not." No one spoke for a while. The stove popped softly. Snow slid from the garage roof in a muffled rush. Sable breathed from her blanket, nose tucked against the cloth. Finally, Naomi looked at Owen. "She's safe here." It was not a question. Owen answered anyway. "I try. She looks at you like she believes that." Owen's throat tightened. "She looks at doors like she believes they're plotting." Naomi laughed softly, wiping at one eye. That too. Then she said the thing Owen had both feared and needed. I'm not here to take her from you. The words entered him carefully, like warmth through numb fingers. Naomi continued. I wanted to know she was alive. I wanted to see her. I wanted to tell her Dane didn't forget her. And I want to help fix the records, so no one can ever call her a stray again. Owen looked toward Sable. The dog had closed her eyes. One paw still held the cloth. She can stay through winter, Naomi said. Longer if that's where she's steady. We can decide with her, not around her. Tessa nodded once, approving the sentence like a treatment plan. Owen did not trust himself to speak immediately, so he turned to the pegboard where he kept spare collars, toe straps, leads, and old work gloves. A new leather collar hung there, dark brown, bought 2 weeks earlier, and not yet admitted to anyone. He took it down. From the workbench drawer, he removed the metal tag Tessa had helped order after the partial record came through. It was plain, sturdy, with clean lettering. Sable retired working K9 safe with Owen Calder. He held it longer than necessary. Naomi read it over his hand. Her face changed. Dane would have liked that. Owen cleared his throat. It's just a tag. No, Tessa said. It isn't. Sable lifted her head as Owen approached. He crouched, showing her the collar first. She sniffed it, then looked past him toward Naomi, then back to Owen. Permission, maybe, or patience. He fastened the collar gently around her neck. The new tag settled against her chest with a small metal sound. Not a chain, not a claim, a witness. That night, after Naomi had gone to the small inn near the bakery, and Tessa had returned to the clinic, the garage settled into a quiet Owen did not know how to measure. Snow pressed softly against the bay doors. The stove burned low. The brass gear on his key ring rested on the workbench beside Sable's new paperwork, folded neatly in a file. Owen sat in the old office chair and watched Sable sleep near the stove. For the first time since she had entered his life, she was not positioned to watch all 3 doors. She lay on her side, the navy cloth tucked near her chest, the new tag catching faint firelight each time she breathed. One paw twitched in a dream. Her torn ear flicked once. Then she settled deeper. Owen wondered whether dogs dreamed of people they had lost. He hoped, if Sable dreamed of Dane Rusk, the man stood in sunlight and not snow. He hoped there were fields in that dream, warm hands, no ropes, no locked sheds, no alleys behind taverns. He reached for his keys and turned the brass gear once between his fingers. All this time, he had thought he was learning how to keep a dog. Now he understood he was learning how to honor one. There was a difference, and in the warm, oil-scented quiet of the garage, with the storm waiting beyond the walls and Sable finally sleeping, without guarding every exit, Owen Calder let that difference sit beside him, like a hard, holy thing. The storm arrived early, as if it had grown tired of being predicted. By mid-afternoon, Hearthfall Ridge had vanished behind a wall of white. Snow did not fall anymore. It traveled sideways, driven by a wind that slapped windows, buried steps, and turned familiar streets into pale shifting guesses. Power flickered twice on Main Street before failing east of the creek. Phone service broke into fragments. The road between Town Center and Frostline Row disappeared under drifts, so fast the plow drivers began sounding less like workers and more like men arguing with a mountain. Owen Calder was at the fire hall when the first bad call came through. The rescue room had become a nest of maps, wet coats, radios, thermoses, and half-eaten food no one remembered starting. Nora Whitcomb stood at the center of it with her red rescue jacket zipped to her throat and the yellow grease pencil tucked behind one ear like a warning flag. Deputy Calvin Reese sat near the radio table, writing times and coordinates in his blue waterproof notebook with the tense precision of a man trying to hold chaos in straight lines. Tessa Hargrove came in through the side door carrying a medical pack and wearing the expression of someone who had already decided half the room was about to do something stupid. Behind Owen, Sable lay on a folded rescue blanket near the heater vent. Not asleep. Listening, her new collar rested against her yellow. and black chest, the metal tag catching the overhead light whenever she breathed. The radio cracked. Calvin leaned in. "Say again." "East Station." Static tore at the answer. A man's voice came through in pieces. "Generator down. Frostline cut off. Bellwether. 5 adults sheltering. Maybe more. Old greenhouse." Then nothing. Nora looked up sharply. "Bellwether," Maeve Larkin's voice came through next, faint but recognizable, carried by a handheld radio that sounded like it had been built during a less forgiving century. "Nora, it's Maeve. We made it to the greenhouse. Back storage room is holding. Russell's cold. Clay's pretending not to be. 2 resort workers with us. 1 twisted his knee. Stove won't draw right. Smoke's coming back in." Owen's hand closed around the edge of the map table. Bellwether Greenhouse sat halfway between Frostline Row and the old South Service cut. Once, it had been a community project, winter greens, seedling starts, school field trips before the school district consolidated, and the building became another good idea left to sag under better funded priorities. The glass house itself was partly broken now, but the storage room behind it still had metal roofing and thick walls. A place to hide from wind. Not a place to trust. Nora took the radio. "Maeve, how many total?" 5, all adults, Russell, Clay, me, 2 men from the resort fuel crew. One's named Peter. Other one's Luis. They missed the turn after dropping canisters. Road's gone. Nora. Anion bleeding. No cold coughing. Russell's hands are bad. Clay says his pride is terminal. From somewhere in the fire hall, someone gave a short laugh that died immediately. Tessa was already opening her pack. "If the stove is backdrafting, they can't stay in that room long." Calvin checked the window. There was no view beyond it, only the storm pressing its white face against the glass. "Plow can't get there. Road is blocked east of Miller's Bend." Nora's eyes moved to Owen. He knew that look. "No," he said before she spoke. "I haven't asked." "You were going to?" "I was going to ask if the tracked unit can take the South Service cut." Owen looked down at the map. "In this wind, maybe means? Maybe means the mountain gets a vote." Nora studied him. "And what does the mountain usually vote?" "Against tourists, fools, and people who trust maps too much." "Good thing we're not tourists," Calvin said. "I can run radio and navigation." Tessa looked at Sable. "She stays in the vehicle." Owen turned toward her. "She stays here." At that, Sable lifted her head. It was a small movement, but everyone near the heater noticed. Tessa did not soften. "She is not working. She is not walking through drifts. She is not pulling anyone. She rides. She alerts, if she alerts. And if I say she is done, she is done." Nora nodded. "Agreed." Owen looked from Nora to Tessa to the dog. Sable had risen now, slowly, favoring one side the way she did when the cold got into the old injuries. She took 2 careful steps and stopped beside Owen's boot, not demanding, not pleading, simply arriving where the decision stood. "You are all impossible," Owen said. Tessa zipped her pack. "Correct, load up." 20 minutes later, the tracked rescue unit growled out of the fire hall bay like an orange beetle built by pessimists. Its black treads bit into packed snow. Floodlights carved tunnels through the storm and lost them almost at once. Owen took the driver's seat. Nora rode beside him with the route map and radio. Calvin sat behind them, headset on, calling updates back to base. Tessa secured the medical bags along the wall. Sable lay on a padded blanket near Tessa's boots, wearing a dark thermal coat that made her look both official and mildly insulted. Owen glanced back once. "Comfortable?" Sable looked at him with tired dignity. Tessa said, "She says your driving will decide." Everyone's a critic. The fire hall vanished behind them. Main Street vanished next. By the time they crossed the creek bridge, even the road seemed less like a road than an agreement they were trying to maintain by force of memory. Snow hit the windshield in frantic streams. The wipers scraped and shuddered. Every few seconds, the wind struck the side of the unit hard enough to make the metal frame groan. Nora pointed ahead. "South cut in 40 yards. 30, Owen said. "You can see? I can remember." "That is not as comforting as you think." The tracked unit turned off the main road and climbed into darker timber. Pine branches leaned under snow on both sides, creating a tunnel that closed behind them. Calvin's voice stayed steady in the headset, but his pen moved faster than usual. "Base. Unit entering South Service Cut. Visibility near 04 responders. 1K9 proceeding to Bellwether." A burst of static answered. The trees thinned near Miller's Bend. That was when a sheet of ice broke from a branch above and slammed against the roof with a sharp metallic crack. Owen's hands tightened on the controls. For a breath, the white windshield was not snow. It was dust. The groan of the unit was not an engine. It was something heavier. Far away, burning under a sun too bright to forgive anything. His foot eased off the pedal. The tracked unit slowed. "Owen," Nora said. He heard her voice, but it came from the far end of a tunnel. Another crack of wind-blown debris hit the side panel. His chest locked. Then something warm pressed against his elbow. Not hard. Not dramatic. Sable had risen as far as Tessa allowed. Her muzzle stretched between the seats, touching the sleeve of his olive-drab combat shirt. Her breath warmed the fabric. Her eyes were open and steady, not asking what he had seen, not pitying him for seeing it. Only reminding him where he was, Vermont. Snow, Nora beside him. Calvin behind him. Tessa's hand on Sable's harness. People alive ahead. Owen inhaled once, rough and deep. The cab returned. He put both hands properly on the controls. "I'm here." Nora did not fuss. She did not ask if he was all right, because she knew better than to demand a lie in bad weather. Instead, she said, "Good, because the road is about to become rude." Owen gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. Road's always been rude. He eased the unit forward. The first tree lay across the cut half a mile later, not large enough to stop them entirely, but heavy with snow and angled badly. Owen and Calvin cleared enough branches with a handsaw and tow line to squeeze past. Tessa stayed with Sable inside, monitoring her breathing and gums with the merciless attention of a field doctor who happened to treat animals. At the second obstruction, the wind had packed snow against the slope so high the treads began to slide sideways. Owen corrected slowly, resisting the old instinct to force the machine through. Force broke things in weather like this. So did pride. Nora watched the slope. Left side drops. "I know." "Right side banks." "I know that too." "Just making conversation." "You're terrible at it. Drive." They moved inch by inch. The unit lurched once, recovered, and climbed over the drift with a hard metallic shudder. Calvin let out a breath behind them that he probably wished had been silent. Then Sable lifted her head. Tessa saw it first. "She's scenting." Owen slowed. "No walking," Tessa warned immediately. "I didn't say walking." Sable's nose worked toward the side vent. Her ears tilted forward. Owen cracked the vent open half an inch, and bitter cold knifed into the cab. Beneath it came a thread of smoke. Weak, wrong. Not clean chimney smoke, choked smoke. Nora leaned toward the windshield. Bellwether should be northeast. Owen turned the unit slightly. Wind's carrying it low. Calvin checked the map. If they're in the storage room, it's just beyond that line of birch. There were no birches visible, only pale ghosts moving in snow. Owen drove another 100 yards. A dark shape appeared ahead, then vanished, then appeared again. The broken ribs of the greenhouse roof, glass panels white with snow, metal frames bent like frozen bones. Behind it crouched the storage building, low and square, its chimney coughing smoke that the wind immediately shredded. Nora lifted the radio. "Base. Unit has visual on Bellwether." Static answered. Then Odette's voice broke through unexpectedly from the fire hall relay. "You bring my people home, Nora. Nora's mouth tightened. That's the plan. Owen parked as close as the drift allowed. The moment he opened the door, the storm hit him full in the face. Snow filled the gap between glove and sleeve. The air was so cold it seemed to ring inside his teeth. "Calvin, line from unit to door," Nora ordered. "Tessa, medical kit, Owen, entry." "Sable stays," Tessa said. Sable stood in the back, tense but contained. Owen pointed at her. "Stay." This time, she did. Whether because she obeyed him or Tessa's hand was on her harness, Owen chose not to investigate. They fought their way to the storage room door with the guide rope between them. Calvin secured it to the unit, then to a metal post near the greenhouse frame. The old structure moaned overhead, glass ticking beneath snow weight. Owen banged the door with his fist. "Maeve," a voice answered. "About time." Clay was about to start singing for warmth. "Don't let him." They forced the swollen door open. Smoke and cold stale air rolled out together. Inside, 5 adults huddled in the dim room. Maeve sat upright on an overturned crate, purple scarf wrapped around her head, face pale but eyes fierce. Russell Dean was beside her, hands tucked under his arms, beard frosted. Clay Booker sat near the stove, grinning weakly under a wool cap. "Shaw," Clay said, voice hoarse. "I improved the place while waiting emotionally." The 2 resort workers sat near the wall, both in dark fuel company jackets. One, broad, shouldered and younger than Owen by a decade, held his knee with both hands. The other, Luis, had a scarf over his mouth and kept coughing. Tessa moved first. "No one stands fast. I check you before you move." Nora pointed at the stove. "Shut it down. Bad draw." Owen crossed to the vent pipe and saw the problem. Ice and packed snow had blocked the outside cap, forcing smoke back into the room. Another hour, maybe less, and this shelter would have become a trap. They worked quickly, not beautifully. Real rescues never were. Calvin helped Russell into a thermal wrap. Nora secured Maeve with a harness line for the walkout. Tessa checked the resort worker's knee, then Luis's breathing. Clay insisted he was fine until he tried to stand and nearly folded sideways. "I meant spiritually," he said. "Then spiritually use my shoulder," Owen told him. The first trip to the unit took Maeve and Luis. The guide rope disappeared into white after 3 feet. Back at the vehicle, Sable remained inside but pressed close to the rear window, eyes fixed on the figures moving through the storm. The second trip brought Russell and the injured worker. The third brought Clay, who complained that being rescued without an audience was bad for morale. By then, the greenhouse roof had begun making sounds Owen did not like. Long, slow ticks, weight shifting. Old metal remembering it was old. Inside the storage room, Tessa grabbed the last medical bag from the floor. "Oxygen kit?" Owen looked toward the corner near the broken interior doorway that led into the glass house. One hard case sat there, partly behind a fallen shelf where Tessa had set it while checking Luis. "I've got it." Nora caught his arm. "Leave it. It's right there." The greenhouse frame groaned. Tessa looked up. "Owen." He pulled free, already stepping toward the corner. Then Sable barked. Once sharp enough to cut through wind, metal, and every bad habit Owen had ever mistaken for courage. He turned. Somehow she had reached the storage room threshold from the unit. Tessa's hand still gripping the rear of her harness, snow clinging to her coat. She stood stiff, legged at the doorway, not coming in, not retreating. Her body blocked the entry just enough to stop him. Her eyes were not on his face. They were above him. Nora heard it then. A deep, splintering crack rolled across the greenhouse roof. "Out," she shouted. Owen moved. Not toward the kit, toward the door. Calvin grabbed the back of his coat and hauled him through as the old glass structure gave way behind them. The collapse was not a cinematic explosion. It was uglier and heavier. Metal bending, glass breaking under snow, a wet thunder of white weight slamming into the space where Owen had been standing. The guide rope snapped tight. Someone cursed. For several seconds, there was only snow and the roar of blood in Owen's ears. Then Nora's hand struck his chest. Not hard. Enough. You with me? Owen stared past her at the crushed corner of the storage room. The oxygen kit was gone beneath a glittering heap of snow, glass, and metal. So was the place where he would have been. He looked down. Sable stood half, covered in snow, panting lightly, trembling from effort and cold. Tessa crouched beside her immediately, wrapping a gloved hand along her ribs. "She's done," Tessa said, voice fierce. "No arguments." Owen nodded. No arguments. He did not trust his voice. They loaded the last of the team and the rescued adults into the tracked unit. The back was crowded, warm, damp, full of coughing, shaking hands, and the sour smell of smoke. Maeve held Sable's navy cloth in one hand because Sable had dropped it near the blanket, and Maeve had decided important things should not be left on floors. Russell looked at the dog. "That girl just outranked all of us." Clay, pale but still Clay, muttered, "I accept her leadership." No one laughed loudly, but several people smiled, which in that moment was almost the same thing. Owen stood outside one breath longer, staring at the collapsed greenhouse through the storm. Nora came beside him. She did not scold. Somehow that made it worse. "You were going back in," she said, "or the kit." "I know. It was right there." "So were you," he swallowed. The wind moved between them, carrying snow over the wreckage. Nora's voice lowered. "Nobody needs you dead to prove you're good, Owen." The words did not strike like a blow. They entered more quietly than that, like heat into frostbitten skin, hurting because feeling had returned. Owen looked toward the tracked unit. Through the side window, he could see Sable lying on the blanket, Tessa's hand resting on her shoulder. The dog's eyes were half closed now, exhausted but peaceful in the crowded warmth of people she had helped bring out alive. Owen had spent years mistaking survival for unfinished duty. There was always one more person to pull out, one more door to enter, one more risk that seemed acceptable if it spared someone else. It had sounded noble in his head, cleaner than admitting he did not always know how to live after the saving was done. Tonight, he had stepped back, not because fear beat him, because someone pulled him, because a dog barked, because a woman who knew triage told him no, because a town needed him breathing tomorrow. He nodded once, not to Nora exactly, but to the truth she had set in front of him. "Let's go home," he said. The ride back was slower. The rescued adults huddled under blankets. Luis coughed less after Tessa treated him. Peter's knee was wrapped and elevated on a crate. Maeve leaned against the wall with her eyes closed, still holding Sable's cloth. Russell slept. Clay whispered to Calvin that if anyone asked, he had personally held the building up for 20 minutes. Calvin wrote that down as patient alert and verbally annoying. Owen drove through the white dark with both hands steady on the controls. Beside him, Nora watched the barely visible road. Behind him, Sable slept at last, pressed between Tessa's medical bag and Maeve's boot, no longer a tool, no longer a stray, no longer a ghost of someone else's file, a teammate protected, spent alive. When the lights of Heartfall Ridge finally blurred into view, Owen did not feel victorious. Victory was too loud a word for wet gloves, smoke, stung lungs, and an old greenhouse collapsed behind them. What he felt was stranger. He felt the weight of everyone still breathing, and for once, he did not believe he had to pay for that by disappearing. Heartfall Ridge did not wake the next morning redeemed. Towns did not work that way. The storm moved on before dawn, dragging its white banners east across the mountains and leaving behind silence, broken branches, buried cars, and roofs bowed under the weight of everything the sky had dropped. The first sunlight came pale and cold, touching the town as if unsure what deserved blessing and what deserved inspection. The resort still stood bright on the North Ridge. Frostline Row still had patched roofs, tired heaters, and people who counted fuel by the inch. Grady Cole still had supporters. That was the part some stories liked to skip. No one woke up suddenly honest because a greenhouse had collapsed. No councilman became humble overnight because a dog barked in a storm. No system repaired itself simply because a few good people had almost died inside the consequences. But something had changed. For the first time in a long while, Frostline Row did not let silence do the talking. 3 days after the Bellwether rescue, the municipal hall filled again. This time, people arrived carrying more than opinions. They brought photographs of empty shelves, copies of delivery notices, logs from radios, receipts from fuel stations, and Maeve Larkin's purple notebook, which had become, without anyone voting on it, the most feared document in town. Owen Calder stood near the back wall, exactly where he preferred to stand. Sable sat beside his left boot. Tessa had allowed her to come on strict terms. Short duration, no crowding, no standing too long, and absolutely no being turned into a mascot for human guilt. Sable obeyed most of those rules with the solemn tolerance of a creature who knew humans required supervision. Her coat had filled out more since the night she climbed into Owen's truck, though her age still showed in the silver at her muzzle and the careful way she lowered herself to the floor. Her brown leather collar rested against her chest. The tag caught the meeting hall light. Sable retired working K9 safe with Owen Calder. Owen had tried not to look at the tag too often. He failed. At the front of the room, Nora Whitcomb laid out the Bellwether report with no drama and no wasted words. She explained the timeline. Generator failure, blocked road, smoke backdraft, structural collapse risk. Calvin Reese followed with radio logs and transfer times, his voice steady though his hand held the notebook tighter than usual. Calvin had changed in small ways since the warehouse. His uniform was still neat. His pen still moved in straight lines. But now, when a document looked too clean, he seemed to distrust it on principle. "The issue," Calvin said, facing the council table, "is not whether the resort needed emergency support. The issue is that supplies assigned to the east route were redirected without field notification, while residents in that route were actively reporting shortages." A man near the front muttered, "The resort keeps half this town employed." Maeve stood before anyone else could answer. She did not lift her voice. She rarely needed to. "And Frostline Row keeps the other half repaired, laundered, fed, driven, shoveled, and alive when tourists go home." The room rustled. Maeve opened her notebook. Owen saw Grady Cole's face settle into the careful stillness of a man preparing to endure a storm indoors. Grady sat at the council table in his navy sweater and gray blazer, silver snowflake pins still fixed to his lapel. He looked tired. Not broken, not defeated. Tired in the way proud men became when the world refused to accept their preferred explanation. Maeve read names again. This time, no one interrupted. Russell Dean, hands frostbitten after falling alone. Mrs. Halverson, vent pipe blocked and roof patched too late. Unit 6, 1 heater shared across 2 rooms. Bellwether, 5 adults sheltering in a failing structure because the East Road had no functioning distribution point. Then Odette Vaughn stepped forward with a folder held like a tavern tray. Her brass elk pin gleamed against her apron. She had no official title, which made her especially dangerous. "These are statements from 3 drivers who saw relief pallets sent uphill," she said. "One of them wrote his in pencil because he claims pens freeze near politicians." A small laugh went through the hall. Even Grady blinked at that. Tessa spoke last. She did not stand at the podium. She disliked podiums, calling them furniture designed to make people lie taller. She stood beside the first row, medical pack at her feet, hair tied back, eyes clear. "What I saw at Bellwether," she said, "was not a lack of generosity. This town has generosity stacked in closets, kitchens, trucks, and taverns. What nearly hurt those people was generosity being managed like private property. Care that has to pass through the wrong hands stops being care. It becomes leverage." That settled over the room, not like applause, like snow on a roof already carrying too much. Grady finally stood. Owen expected polish. He expected the smooth voice, the careful phrases, the gentle accusation that everyone else was too emotional to understand scale. Grady had built a life on sounding reasonable before anyone else could sound wounded. But this time, his voice came slower. "I believed," Grady said, "that protecting North Ridge protected the town." No one spoke. He looked toward the windows, beyond which the resort lights were invisible in daylight, but present all the same. "I still believe the resort matters. Jobs matter. Revenue matters. A town cannot feed people with good intentions alone." Maeve's jaw tightened. Grady looked at her, then at Nora, then at Calvin's notebook. "But I made decisions without listening to the people who knew the roads, the houses, and the actual conditions. I treated hardship as something that could wait because it had waited before." For a moment, the hall held its breath. It was not a confession big enough for songs. It was not justice with trumpets. It was a man stepping down from a hill he had mistaken for wisdom. "I will remove myself from winter relief allocation pending county review," Grady said. "And I will support a temporary oversight board." Someone scoffed. Someone else whispered that it was about time. A few of Grady's supporters looked angry. Others looked relieved, which was more complicated. Owen studied Grady and found no satisfaction. The man had not become a villain in defeat any more than he had been a hero in authority. He had simply become smaller, which sometimes happened when truth entered a room and took back the space pride had rented. Nora stood. "Then let's build the board before the next storm does it for us." That was how Hearthfall Ridge began changing. Not with cheers, but with chairs scraping closer to tables. The temporary winter relief board formed by the end of the week. Nora represented the rescue team. Calvin represented law enforcement and logistics. Tessa represented emergency medical and animal welfare coordination, though she objected to the title being too long. Odette represented small businesses, because apparently no one could stop her. Maeve represented Frostline Row, and when someone suggested calling her a community liaison, she said she would rather be called by her name, and everyone wisely agreed. Owen was not on the board. He made that very clear. Then Maeve started leaving updated delivery lists on his workbench. Nora started sending him road priority notes. Calvin stopped by with confirmed supply routes. Odette delivered coffee in a thermos labeled for men who claim not to be involved. So Owen was not on the board. In the same way Winter was not technically an animal. Present everywhere. Difficult to ignore. Bellwether Greenhouse became the next argument. Some wanted it condemned. Some wanted it forgotten. Some wanted a new feasibility study, which Odette said was a phrase invented to bury good ideas in expensive paper. Maeve proposed repairing the storage section first. Nora supported it. Calvin found the old deed language showing the property still belonged to the town. Tessa noted that it sat at a critical midpoint between Frostline Row and town center. Clay Booker volunteered to inspect the roof, then immediately declared the building structurally embarrassed but emotionally available. By the second week, half the town had touched Bellwether in some way. Clay and 2 retired ski patrol members reinforced the storage room roof. Russell Dean, forbidden from climbing anything by 3 separate women, sharpened tools and complained from a folding chair. Odette brought soup. Maeve organized donated blankets by size and actual usefulness, which meant rejecting anything that looked decorative but could not survive a washing machine. Calvin installed a radio relay. Tessa stocked first, aid supplies, and a locked animal care bin for emergencies. Owen repaired the generator. He claimed that was all he was doing. Then he fixed the door, then the stovepipe, then the busted south window, then the old sink line. Sable supervised from a long wooden bench near the wall, lying on her blanket like a retired queen inspecting peasants. Her navy cloth from Dane lay beside her front paws. Anyone who tried to fuss too much received a long amber stare that discouraged foolishness more effectively than posted rules. The first day Bellwether opened as a winter shelter. It smelled of damp wood, new paint, coffee, and stubborn hope. It was not beautiful. The walls did not match. The floor sloped near the back corner. The sign outside had been hand-painted by Clay, who insisted the crooked letters gave it regional authority. Bellwether Winter Station coffee heat charging supplies. No nonsense. Odette added a smaller note beneath it. Sable is not customer service. Everyone ignored that, and greeted Sable anyway. The opening was supposed to be informal, which in Hartfall Ridge meant someone brought a ribbon and someone else brought muffins. Naomi Rusk drove back from New Hampshire that morning, with photographs tucked in a flat envelope and snow salt dried along the hem of her navy coat. When Sable saw her, the dog rose slowly from the bench. Naomi crouched, smiling softly. "Hi, girl." Sable walked to her without hurry and pressed her head briefly against Naomi's shoulder. Then, as if satisfied that the past had arrived safely, she returned to the bench. Naomi laughed through wet eyes. "She has appointments, I see." "She's busy," Owen said, "judging the muffins." Naomi brought out the photographs. Dane Rusk with Sable in autumn light, Sable younger, standing alert beside training cones. Dane sitting in a chair with 3 old working dogs asleep around him, one hand resting on Sable's back. They hung the photos in a small corner near the supply shelves. Not as a shrine, more like a window. A reminder that service did not end when strength faded, and that beings who had carried others still deserved a place to lay down. Owen stood back while Naomi adjusted the last frame. "You okay?" she asked. "No." She glanced at him. He shrugged, "But not in a bad way." "That may be the most hopeful thing you've said. Don't spread it around." Too late, Odette had heard. "Owen Calder said something hopeful," she announced. "Somebody mark the date." Owen turned. "This is why people avoid community." "No," Odette said, handing him a paper cup of coffee. "This is why community keeps receipts." Nora eventually tapped a spoon against a mug and called for everyone's attention. The room quieted in pieces. "Owen," she said. He immediately narrowed his eyes. "No, you don't know what I'm asking." "Yes, I do." "Good then. Come say it quickly." Owen looked at Sable. Sable looked back with the serene cruelty of a friend who would not rescue him from speaking. The crowd waited. He walked to the front of the room with all the comfort of a bear invited to dance at a wedding. His olive-drab combat shirt showed beneath a gray wool coat. The camouflage sleeves were partly hidden, but not gone. He set one hand on the edge of the supply table, grounding himself against real wood. He did not give a speech. Speeches belonged to men like Grady. Owen had only a few words, and they came rough around the edges. "Rescue doesn't start when the radio goes off," he said. "It starts when somebody notices who's been left outside too long." The room stayed quiet. He looked toward Frostline Row people, then toward the resort workers standing near the coffee urn. Peter still using a knee brace, Luis with a scarf around his neck. It means blankets get where they're supposed to go. It means roads get checked before they disappear. It means if one side of town is cold, the whole town is not warm. He stopped. That felt like enough. Then he added, because Sable's tag had taught him the power of saying a thing plainly. Nobody should have to prove they're useful to deserve shelter. This time, the silence did not feel heavy. It felt like something being held carefully. Maeve wiped her eyes and pretended she had not. Clay clapped once, too loudly, then looked embarrassed and clapped again, out of commitment. The room followed, not with thunder, but with the uneven warmth of people still learning how to be together without waiting for disaster to introduce them. Owen returned to Sable's bench. "Don't look at me like that," he told her. Sable sneezed. Naomi covered her mouth to hide a smile. Winter did not end after that. Of course it did not. There were still bad roads, late deliveries, arguments in council meetings, and mornings, when the cold came through the garage walls like an unpaid debt. Grady's review continued. Some people said he had been treated unfairly. Others said unfairness had finally learned his address. The oversight board made mistakes. The first version of the bellwether supply chart confused lamp oil with laundry detergent, which Odette declared a very clean disaster. But the deliveries changed. Frostline Row received its fuel vouchers on time. The resort still got emergency supplies, but not by emptying another route in secret. Calvin began posting distribution logs at Bellwether and Town Hall. Maeve added handwritten notes when official language became too slippery. Nora built a storm check schedule that included houses, not just roads. Tessa made Sable rest more than Sable considered dignified. Clay repaired things with jokes no one asked for. Odette kept feeding everyone and denying she had a soft heart despite overwhelming evidence. And Owen stopped locking the garage door before dusk. Not every night, but often enough. People began stopping by, Clay with a roof bracket, Calvin with route updates, Maeve with lists, Odette with pie, Naomi with letters and photographs from Dane's old files. Sometimes they came for help. Sometimes they came to bring something. Sometimes they simply came because the garage was warm and Sable was there, lying near the stove with one eye open, making sure the human race did not embarrass itself beyond repair. Owen still grumbled. He still disliked cups placed on his workbench. He still answered emotional questions as if they were suspicious engine noises. But he stayed. That was the miracle. If there was one. Not that a town became perfect. Not that a wounded dog became young again. Not that a lonely man turned suddenly bright. The miracle was smaller and harder. The door remained open. One morning after the last heavy storm of February, sunlight broke over Hartfall Ridge with such clean force that every roof glittered. Snow lay deep along the streets, but the sky was blue enough to make even old grief look temporarily manageable. Owen opened the garage bay door. Cold air rolled in. Sable stepped out beside him. Slow but steady, her tag tapping softly against her collar. Her black and tan coat shone in the light. The torn ear tilted toward the street. Across the road, Calvin was helping Russell clear a walkway. Clay shoveled Mrs. Halverson's porch while pretending to conduct an orchestra with the shovel. Maeve stood outside a neighbor's house, handing over a thermos. Odette's truck was parked crookedly near the curb, which meant soup had arrived somewhere without asking permission. Farther down, 2 resort workers helped unload blankets at Bellwether from a town truck. The road no longer looked like a line dividing who mattered. It looked like a road used both ways. Owen slid his hands into his coat pockets. Looks like we're stuck with them. Sable sneezed into the snow with grave disapproval. Owen nodded. Fair. She leaned lightly against his leg, not because she needed balance, because she could. And under the bright winter sky of Hartfall Ridge, a retired Navy SEAL and an old German Shepherd stood at the edge of the open garage, no longer guarding separate doors against the cold. They watched a town learn, clumsily but truly, that no one should have to stand watch alone. Sometimes healing does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, through an open door, a warm room, a neighbor who finally knocks, or an old dog who reminds a tired man that he does not have to stand guard alone. May this story remind us to notice the people who have been left out in the cold, and to be grateful for the small mercies God places in our path. A kind word, a shared meal, a faithful companion. These may be the little miracles that help someone make it through the storm. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us who Sable and Owen reminded you of. And if you would like more stories of loyalty, healing, and hope, please subscribe and stay with us for the next one. May peace find your home, and may grace meet you on the road ahead.